All right, guys. So, welcome to Startup Grind Charleston. I am the director. My name is Alex, and I'm so honored to be here today with the co-founders of a local company here in Charleston called Blender Bombs. So, Helen Hall and Scott Maynor are with us today. Helen and Scott, thank you all both for joining us. It's so great to see you guys again. I know we haven't talked since later last year, but you guys I really am such a fan of you both, and Blender Bombs, of course, but you guys just as people are like some of my favorite people now. So I'm a big fan girl.
Well, yeah, thanks for having us, and we love you too, and we enjoyed speaking with you. It seems like months ago now, but I think it's only been probably like 20 days.
No, it seems like it was like a week ago.
And for me, it seems. But yeah, we're delighted to be here. I mean, we're the type of people who would be on the other end of this at all the time and trying to learn and communicate and become friends with people. So it's really kind of a wild experience to be on the other end of the startup grind. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. And then we have for the Charleston chapter, because Startup Grind is a global organization, for the Charleston chapter, we have a Facebook group. And today, I'm not sure if Ellison is on the call today. If he is, hey, but he and I were joking because I was sharing information about you guys in the group today, just to say like, hey, this is who we'll be interviewing. This is who you can meet. Mm-hmm. And we were laughing because Scott, I know by trade, you're an attorney. And Baird Hall, who is of no relation to Helen Hall, was our speaker last month. And his co-founder was an attorney turned developer. Wow. So I'm starting to see this theme. And so we were joking that if you want a good co-founder, you might have to cold call some attorney offices to find your person.
Well, in our breakout room, I had a really good question or comment rather from William, and he said, we wanted to talk about the decision-making process. And I said, that's such a great question because Helen and I's background are so different. She's the innovator, she's the idea person, and I was the more analytical person. And because of my background as a lawyer, and before that, a sales rep for a tobacco company, you can see this trend of getting healthier. It was pretty drastic, but. I think that my decision making was very different, and that goes back to the law theme. I think that it definitely helped me sort of analyze issues top to bottom and forecast a fairly good decision making. Don't get me wrong; I've made very poor and expensive decisions throughout the way, but I've also had a sharp learning curve from those. So
yeah.
I think the law side is helpful, but it is not a good investment to go to startup school. That's for sure.
Well, talking about going back, Scott, let's start with you since we're already kind of chatting here. Let's go back a little farther. And I just want to ask, was there any point in maybe, say, the first 18 years or so of life that you feel that stands out to you that maybe put you on track to get where you are now in life?
That's a great question. Yes, there's two things that come to mind when I think about where I grew up. It was a pretty ordinary place, Greensboro, North Carolina. But my father was an entrepreneur, and he was a casket salesman. So we would go to funeral homes growing up. I would be on the truck trying to push caskets around out of the truck. That's a morbid way to think of it, but it was just business. That was my life growing up every summer. And it helped me put on the sort of understand sales from like a relationship point of view. And it was way more important to sort of generate a business from a sales mentality as you're building relationships with people. And that seems, as an adult, it seems like, well, duh. But as a child, I think that was really formative for me and really helpful. And I think the second aspect is I just really loved sports growing up. And I didn't know this at the time, but I thought later on, especially when I was later in high school and going into college, that I'd been put in positions in athletics or in a group mentality. Now, I think this can apply to people who are musicians and they worked in a band, or people who are in art and they had to work to collaborate on a project, or theater or anything. It helped me learn sort of leadership skills. So it made me sort of I wouldn't say Helen says I'm a terrible leader half the time, but I think that's because we butt heads because we both think we're right all the time. But at the same time, I think it helped put me in positions to make executive decisions earlier rather than later, which helps move that sort of startup pencil a little bit forward each time. And I can attribute those two things to where I am today, really. I mean, I don't know what I would have been doing had I not had that sales experience with my dad, going to funeral home after funeral home all over the Carolinas and meeting people who were also entrepreneurs. Every person we met was owning a family-owned business. And so it's a fundamental part of our society that, think of funeral homes, even though it's sort of that darker and tail end of the spectrum, but it's still really an important aspect. And I was learning it from sort of the business side.
Yeah.
At a young age.
For sure.
Put my notes down. So I don't forget.
Does that kind of answer your question? I know that's kind of a weird way to.
No, it's not weird at all. And that certainly answers it. Sports, and then I forgot that you told me that your dad was also an entrepreneur. So in a way, it's kind of like you had that crash course in entrepreneurship and business building. So
yeah, and I never thought of him as an entrepreneur until recently. I always just sort of assumed that that's who he was. And then I recall back being younger, and I remember he had a mentor. There was this fella, this older guy, he's long since been gone now, but he helped my father make some good business decisions, and one of them was investing in property so he could get a warehouse, because he was renting this old dingy piece of junk warehouse in downtown Greensboro that had been burned out years ago. I mean, it wasn't the most successful, glamorous business most of the time, but it turned a corner later on because he invested everything back into the business, and it turned out to work really well. But that mentorship, kind of like a startup grind place, really kind of helped catapult himself into another echelon of his own business.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And mentorship, it seems, just based on other startup grind events that we've done, that mentorship comes up so much. We've seen with founders that have sat down with us. So you're not off track there at all. Helen, how about you? Were there any pivotal moments in your first 18 years of life that you feel put you on track to get where you are now with Blender Bombs?
Just to kind of like bounce off what Scott said, I grew up similarly, moving stuff around every summer. My mom owns a furniture store, so every summer I was there watching her move things around. But unlike Scott, where he learned what to do, I learned a lot of what not to do. So my mom she's great, great human, but we run our businesses very differently. She hoards furniture instead of moving inventory when she has too much. Her whole entire desk is cluttered instead of, moving to this online platform where you scan a bill or you scan paperwork so then you can throw it away. So I learned a lot of what not to do from her, but I also learned how to communicate with customers. And how to set your boundaries. And, a lot of times customers will try to push you over. Today we got an email from a customer saying, hey, I ordered 2 cases of bomb bars, but I didn't realize how much sugar was in them. Can I get a full refund? And it's like, customers will try to bully you, but you just have to set your boundaries. So instead, what my mother would have taught me to do basically was say, hey, just so you know, give an explanation for just so you know, the sugars that you see don't go towards the dietary suggestions for sugar. So women, it's suggested 25 grams of sugar a day. But what she doesn't know that when the sugar is from a fruit, like a whole fruit, not a concentrated fruit, that doesn't even go towards the 25 grams of sugar because it's from dates. So I had to explain that to her, and then also be like, I'm sorry, we cannot, just refund you, but you can return it and pay for the shipping, and then we'll refund you. So if she ships it to my house, then we can refund her, that sort of thing. But sports as well, additionally, just like Scott was a leader or a captain for his sports teams, I was also a captain for the sports that I was good at, not the ones that I wasn't good at, but the sports that I was good at. And so just kind of, that's how I developed my leadership skills. And to Scott's comment, to say how I have told him multiple times that I think he's not a good leader for our team, you have to think about it. The way that guys talk to guys in sports is I could cuss that was so effing horrible. Get your shit together, Whereas
I don't talk like that.
Okay. Yeah, for the record, Scott doesn't.
That is how, but in sports, that's how boys communicate with each other during sports. So they'll punch them they're just harder. Whereas girls in sports are it's okay. We're just going to put our heads down and do it better next time. And our team. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say.
So it's funny because our team is all women, right? But then in the smoothie bar business, we have a consultant named David who's kind of like Scott, he's going to tell you how it is. He'll push you, he'll curse at you if he needs to. So watching them interact, and sometimes they'll get frustrated with each other, but then they're over it 30 seconds later. Whereas with girls, if we snap at each other, it takes us a couple of days to get over it. So that's where we've kind of had to learn, there's certain people on the team that I work well with, and there's certain people that Scott works well with, like a girl from New York, they can get in a disagreement, but be fine 30 seconds later. Whereas, us from South Carolina, we're like, I'm gonna need a minute to get over this. But yeah, those are the two like leadership things. That's the same, just working for our parents, sports. I guess being in charge of homecoming in college, that taught me a lot, like how to rally a group of people together and delegate. Delegating is, I think, my strong point too.
I would speak to Helen. I don't know where it came from, but her ability to start an idea and take it. And like, this is one of those things that we could probably talk on here for hours about how you take an idea from up here to holding it in your hand and then getting it, making someone else believe that they need to purchase this from you. And that is, to me, that's such an amazing concept. And her ability to do that, I've never seen anything like it. I really haven't. I mean, and she moves like the speed of light with stuff like that. And I'm much slower. I think it would take me 6 years to get a product to market. But
that's because and to speak to Scott on that, I think it's because of his law background where, if he had started Blender Bombs, he probably would have made way less mistakes. It just would have taken him a lot longer to launch.
Definitely.
Probably would have saved a lot more money. But I got it out there quickly with a lot of mistakes, wasted a lot of money along the way.
She did great.
Either way, you got to weigh your pros and cons.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I started the business when I didn't make mistakes, or it didn't start at all, kind of thing.
Something that we talk about at the company I work for, which is also a startup, a phrase that comes up a lot is don't let perfection get in the way of doing good. So right. While I can resonate with both of you, I really want to be nitpicky on stuff. And sometimes we just need to push it out and see what happens. So I really grapple with that. And I feel like a lot of our community does as well. So it's good to hear that from both sides as well. Because right now I feel like Helen and Scott, I have like one on each shoulder. Like I'm not going to say which one I think is the angel or the devil, but I think they're both like deserve a spot there. So
well, it's funny that you say that because there's a time and a place for Scott's personality, and that is the role that he's in now. And it's being in Whole Foods and being in Costco, where you cannot make mistakes. If it was just me running this business, we wouldn't be in Whole Foods and Costco because I'm not detail oriented. So you can speak to that. I know that's one of the questions we wanted to cover was the experience of becoming a new food distribution supplier in major retail chains. And that's
I think Alex will let us know.
I appreciate it. We're all on the same page, and I think I over prepare sometimes for these, but I'm just like, I just want everyone to know what we're going to be working on so that we just, I'm as prepared as I can be, but y'all are just naturally like charismatic. So I'm not too worried. But before we get to Whole Foods, I know there were a few steps, Helen, that you were kind of just grazing over a little bit as far as like getting started with Blender Bombs. So what were you doing before Blender Bombs existed?
Personal trainer. So I was actually, for those of you who don't know what a Blender Bomb is, it's a ball. So like a 2 tablespoon size ball. We can pull one out, but it's made of chia seed, hemp seed, flax seed, walnuts, pecans, dates, aloe, and a little bit of bee pollen. So aloe and bee pollen are not in every flavor though. But in college, I was measuring out all of those nuts and seeds and putting them in my smoothie. And I didn't think anything of it. Like I had the time, I wasn't busy, I was bored. And so when I got into the real world and became a personal trainer, my time was more valuable. And so I have always had a knack for finding shortcuts for things. And this is not good, but I would, take online classes and maybe look up the answers on Google if I could. I just that's an example of a shortcut. Trying to think of other shortcuts. I cut my hair myself, so I don't have to go to the salon and waste my time. Anything that I can do to save time, my entire life, I've done it to save time. Mm-hmm. So with Blender Bombs, the idea hit me once I realized that my clients were not going to make that smoothie, to take all those ingredients, add a date in there and some honey to make it sweet and stick together and create this product, which was a smoothie ball. And later, Scott helped me coin the term Blender Bomb. But the idea just hit, and it was an automatic yes. You know that feeling when you just know the answer is yes? That's what it was. It was a download, like an idea spark. So I went to Costco. My mom took me to Costco. I bought all these ingredients in bulk, and it was about $150 for that first run. And the first recipe I ever made, which it wasn't even a recipe, it was just the same ratio that I was always using, but I just multiplied it by like 20.
It was the first batch.
Yeah, the first batch. And that's, I mean, give or take, mass production changes, but that's the recipe that we use today as the base of our blender bombs. But at first, because I didn't have any money, I was so broke. I literally had like $50 in my bank account. And my dad bought my LLC for my birthday present. My mom took me to Costco, and I took that $150 order and probably sold like 30 bags from it. And then I had, $100 in my bank account. And then I went back to Costco and bought $100 for the stuff. And then I had like $200 in my bank account, like things like that, I just kept using plastic baggies until I could afford real packaging.
Point as you're making all these Costco trips and you're making these blender bombs. Sorry, I couldn't think of the term that you called them before because blender bombs. Yeah, so your branding is on point. The character arc of this product has like really developed nicely so far. So as you're making these Costco trips, at what point did you realize, as your clients are asking like more and more and placing more orders, at what point did you realize that you had validated this product and you were like, this could be something, like I'm onto something?
I started getting a lot of text messages from male clients saying that their wives liked the blender bombs and that their wives wanted to order some. And so after about 3 or 4 weeks of doing that, I just started promoting them on my Instagram account. And then I was at coffee with my friend Kate, and she was like, you should start a Shopify store. And I was like, sure. So I went home that night and I looked up what Shopify was. I'd never heard of it. And I built a Shopify store. Your first month is free. And Shopify did good for that. If that first month wasn't free, I wouldn't have been on Shopify. And so I started building a Shopify store. And then I think I got 2 orders the first day. Caroline Perkins was one of them. Our realtor was actually one of them.
Shout out.
And because she bought that order, 4 years ago, that is why we used her as our realtor.
There's a funny story about Shopify. We got booted off Shopify one time. Shopify payments, they were like, you can't
sell CBD.
We were selling the canna bombs, which we have a local CBD supplier at Apis Mercantile, who's another startup company, who's a customer and friend of ours. And we're making these CBD bombs, and apparently you're not allowed to sell CBD stuff on Shopify.
That's an example of my shortcut mentality gone wrong, because I knew we weren't supposed to do that. So instead I called them they weren't called I didn't call them canna bombs, or I didn't put CBD in. I called them chill bombs.
Chill pills.
I was like chill pill bombs.
Back to the story. That's just funny because
that was my shortcut gone wrong.
Shopify is a love-hate relationship. But
yeah. So at the point of the Shopify mishap, Scott, were you involved deeply with blender bombs at this point, or were you just the name idea guy and like you were hands off?
So I was still at the initial phase of this. I was pretty hands off. I helped her roll bombs in her kitchen once or twice, and I complained the whole way, like, "What are you doing? Like, get a real job."
He was not very supportive.
I was supportive because I was supportive, but I was also like a little bit like, "What is going on here?" I was good. I like to trash myself, but I was more supportive than I'm laying out to be. But at the same time, no, I think her and I had some discussions about it, but my involvement was pretty slim up until she's not giving me any credit, but yeah, I was around. I just wasn't. I had my own full-time job. I'd get home at 6, 7 o'clock, and I was like, the last thing I want to do is help you roll bombs, and put them in. And I want to have dinner and like chill and watch Netflix like everyone else. But that's not the startup. That's not the way, So we had to get busy, and she did a great job of maximizing all the time, all the spare time she had, no matter what time it was. And so hats off to her. She didn't take any breaks, and she put up with me. And then at my sort of joining it was, I was going to start my own practice with my best friend, who ended up doing it himself, but he was traveling with his wife in between jobs. And he said, I'm going to be gone 6 months before we come back and do this. I said, great. Well, that gives me 6-month runway to help Helen. And then we can start our thing. And she needed the help. She'd asked me to come help her. And as soon as I got there, about 30 days into helping her, I realized how much work could be done that I needed to do. And I knew it wasn't her strength. So I was going to be able to, we got to make this, there's a real business here, and we've got to get it tightened up to where it starts to make sense, because it's awesome when you're doing great on this part of it, but the rest of it is sort of like she was losing money on, didn't know what terms were, nobody knew what, 3% net 7 was or whatever. So she needed to find it. She was just, overpaying and not, there was a lot of things. So we started getting non-GMO certified. We started getting better packaging, better branding. We started tightening up all the ingredient supply chains and with our co-manufacturer and what we're doing on fulfillment. And then we started to focus on, all right, we got the back end straightened out. Let's go and push and be really aggressive on the sales end. And that was starting to work. And one of the things that she did really, really well was on social media, sort of generate this following. And I know Jenny asked a question earlier about that.
I love Jenny.
God, there's so many, answers to that. And so Helen's ability to do that is, I can't even speak to it. I would let her sort of talk about it, but watching it from the outside in, it was like, wow, this is, if only we could replicate this formula so easily, this would be $1 million idea. But
well, back to your initial question.
Sorry, I got way off track.
No worries. I'm about to reel you in.
Talk about it. But you asked how I knew it was a real business, and it was just the testimonials that I got. I mean, I was constantly getting testimonials, and it was constant, and they were real. I was crying constantly because people would tell me, this lifestyle helps them lose X amount of pounds, or their eczema's clearing up, or they no longer binge eat, which was my issue, was binge eating. And then I stopped once I started having the smoothies every day. So I knew that I had to do more with it. And then I started selling to clients at Hilo, where I was a personal trainer. And I slowly weaned off teaching classes at Hilo based on what I could afford. Jeffy, Mr. Jeff. And so, yeah, I a lot of times people are like, just dive right in. If you really want to do it, you'll figure it out financially. But I didn't do that. I weaned off so I could make sure I could afford my living.
For sure. And I mean, it's different for everyone. So advice, that someone may give you in good faith might not be realistic, especially when you think about finances in this economy, especially.
And there's a book called Big Magic, which if anyone is trying to figure out when is a good time for you to lean off of your full-time job and just take your business full-time, Big Magic is great because it talks about how when you are financially stressed with your creative baby, you start to skew the purpose of your creative baby, or whatever it is. For me, Blender Bombs, you start skewing the mission because all you're trying to do is drive sales. And then you get anxious and you get frustrated because you don't have this sort of back pocket income to rely on. So I definitely recommend Big Magic.
Yeah, that's such a great read. I read it a few years ago as well. And I loved it. I did a whole presentation on it to all of my friends. It was fine. It was cool, but in a cool way.
You're a friend that everybody needs.
Yeah, they're just like, Alex, please, we don't want to do this right now.
Stop it, all this self-help, personal development stuff.
Yeah, but it's cool. So I have to ask you all this question, and it's kind of twofold. So I'll start with this one being, can you share a little bit about what it's like growing a business with your significant other? Because, and I don't think I explicitly said this so far in our chat, but not only are you partners in business, but in life as well. So I know you both got engaged last year. What is that like? Because I think a lot of folks might feel hesitant to go down that route, but what has it been like for y'all personally?
I think we can both answer this, and we might have separate answers. I would say it is very difficult, but I would say that we've practiced it and gotten better at doing it over time. There's been many occasions where we were both like, nope, not anymore. We're not doing this, and we still both stuck it out because I think we both saw the greater cause, and I would say that we realized after a while that we could separate. Although working together and being together all the time can be a lot, we decided to separate sort of silos of the business. So like I would be in operations and sales, and she would be in the marketing and in innovation portals. So we could we are collaborating all the time, but when it comes to like executive decision making, we aren't stepping on each other's toes. And I trust her to do those things really well, and she trusts me to do the things that I'm doing well enough. And of course, if we have questions, we can lean on each other for support. But I think that it's been difficult, and I also think if you can make it work, it can be amazing. It can be extraordinary, and so that's where we are right now. I mean, but we'll see what Helen has to say.
No, I agree with Scott that us learning how to separate our businesses, like he does the logistics and the big wholesale accounts, and I do the marketing and, you know, sort of the new product development, which I'm not doing anymore because we're not adding any new products. But that's only because
keep up.
He told me no more products, we have too many SKUs. And if he hadn't have said that and been like, hey, this hurts our cash flow because we have to buy, you know, thousands of dollars worth of new packaging every time, I just would have kept creating. So it's good. We're the most yin and yang possible. But I will say, like, if both of you are not consciously and consistently working on personal development and being the best version of yourself for each other, it will not be fun.
Yeah, I've got a reminder on my phone that says do something nice for Helen today. And so I have to keep in mind that our relationship and the business, it's so hard to cut one off because the business never stops in the startup. It's always on. The email's always pinging. Like I can imagine like 30, 40 years ago, you leave the office and then that it doesn't bother you unless somebody has an emergency. But now you cannot get away from it. And so it's tough. And we find ourselves, we'll go on a date and we find ourselves going back to work in a conversation. And we're constantly challenging each other to change the subject. And Helen's really good about that. She's like, let's talk about something else, you know, and let's talk about each other, or what was made tell me about your day. What was the best part of your day? And she's really good about that. And I'm working on getting better. So I would say it is a challenge, and it's not all silver lining and like butterflies and lollipops all the time. It's definitely tough, but we're making it work.
Yeah.
Phone messages instead of text, and questions still came in 24/7, just a different manner. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and, you know, stone tablets and being dropped at your doorstep. It's tough, but we're just trying to separate it as little as we can. We're about to go on the road with each other for a road show, and we're going to do this. I'm sure we'll get into that, but it's going to require some heavy mental and physical and physiological lifting on our relationship so that we can stay grounded on and love each other while we're working so hard.
I would say personally, like I've worked I work 24/7 when I'm awake. I am working constantly and I love it. And if I don't think I would be able to be with someone who I didn't work with because they wouldn't understand.
That's a good point.
I work all the time.
I couldn't imagine not being involved and then coming home or being home or whatever. Mm-hmm. And being like, hey, I need some attention. Yeah. Because it would be pretty tough. I get her attention by pinging her on email.
Yeah. So let me ask both, and maybe this isn't the easiest question, but I'm going to ask it because not everything is easy. And to Scott's point, not everything is rainbows and lollipops. And when I ask this, just the first thing that comes to mind regarding Blender Bombs, what has been the biggest fight that you two have had regarding the business and where you're going, or like a decision that you've had to make?
How much equity he gets.
Oh, wow.
Scott's like, oh.
I thought that's an easy one.
I would say that's been the most repetitive argument.
I would say I would disagree. I would think it's been how we kind of lead. Like we have this amazing team of people, and they are all, coincidence or not, friends of Helen's.
They're like my best friends.
They are all just her friends and minions. They're like, minions is not the right term, but they're all her friends. And from before or during or but one girl was a neighbor, she was a neighbor in the apartment. And she's exceptional. That doesn't matter. It's
Scott used to hate her. Scott literally used to hate this girl, and now they work better together than anyone.
I didn't hate anybody. Hate's a strong word.
You didn't hate her. Yeah, you thought she was annoying. Because she was from New York and talked really fast and loud.
All right, so I would say I think you can see how this is playing out right here on the interviews and how this is like a constant thing. So like Helen thinks that the way I might discuss a project with some people is going to be detrimental to their sensibilities. And if you ask them, they're like, I don't know. I mean, so it's one of those outside the crystal ball looking in things. And I think that when someone tells you you're just not doing something right, it's just tough when you're like, what do you mean I'm not doing this right? Like there's no other way to do it. But at the same time, you can always improve, and you have to be willing to listen to her and get better. And there have been times where she said I've done really well too. So.
Yeah, Scott can rally the troops for sure. He can also disappoint the troops, but so can I. I mean, it's that 80-20 concept. Scott there's two people on the team that he works really well with that I like, if someone doesn't end the sentence with an exclamation point, I'm like, oh my God, they're mad at me.
Why don't you love me?
Where's the excitement?
I think I work well with everybody, but
I guess I just mean the exclamation points. There's two people on the team who don't use exclamation points.
So there you go. It's a challenge. I would have thought it was our styles because I'd say that's the biggest thing is when you have the business and it goes from not being just you to being another people that you have to remember that they're relying on you week in, week out to deliver. You're expecting them to deliver, but they're expecting you to deliver so that you can meet the agreement, the salary or the payment or whatever your thing is. And then have to do this day in, day out so that we're still going to be happy friends at the end of this. And so it's just, you're a young business and trying to figure it out as we go. And there have been challenges, but
the leadership question, not to cut you off, but to just continue and give you a different perspective. I think that is maybe the biggest issue is the way I lead and rally people and talk to people is very different than the way he does.
Very different.
It's night and day. Like I really, the people I work with are my best friends, and it is not it's not I'm your boss mentality. It's like we are on the same playing field, and Scott has that too. But Scott, the way that he presents expectations is very different than I do. And, I had to learn from him. He's had to learn from me. And so I think
our work experiences are different. I mean, I came from I wouldn't say stuffy, but an office corporate environment before, and her experiences before me were different than mine. So our understanding of workflow, whether it's right or wrong, doesn't really matter. It's just what we know, it becomes part of your DNA where you work over years and years and years, and you become sort of accustomed to that. Like people might think, an annual bonus at Christmas time, the Jelly of the Month Club is a real gift. And then some people might say, oh, I've never gotten a bonus. Like I never got a bonus.
For example.
And so those things, what I'm saying is it's just part of our DNA. And I think that shows out in the way we work with others.
Because he's 8 years older than me. He's had more jobs than I ever have. And so, for the first year of this business, I was by myself. He hopped in a year later. And so I had developed these structures in place where it's we work we work all the time, but our communication hours, the whole team has to be available on Slack from 9:30 to 3:30. But after 3:30, they're off. And then normally they come back on at night or they come back on in the morning, depending on if you're a morning person or a late person. I prefer to work from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. sort of thing. And I feel like it was a little bit difficult for Scott he's on board now and likes it, but I think it was a little bit difficult for you to understand this new era, let my people go surfing sort of.
I'm just an old chip off the old block, Clark Griswold type of guy. So there you go.
No, but you embrace it now. He spent a week in Mexico last week working from Mexico, and that's the type of culture that we want in this business.
It's true.
So what other I guess, ways do you, and you might have different ways of doing this since it sounds like you both have different leadership styles. And then we'll move on because I have a couple of other things that I really want to learn from y'all before we log off today. But how do you learn and grow as a leader and develop your leadership style as your team has grown and as you're, continuing down this path and y'all are headed into your 4th year of business? Is there anything particular that you do to develop those skills, either of you?
I am constantly reading, constantly listening to leadership podcasts. And more so than anything, I listen to my gut on things and question everything. Like if something doesn't make sense, I'll question it. I also ask the team a lot before we make decisions what they would like to see, because we're still a small 6-person team. So this book, Let My People Go Surfing, I read it actually only, I guess, 6 months ago was the first time I read it, but I've read it twice since then. It will change your life, and it reaffirmed this new style way that I had been developing the leadership for our team.
It's not about surfing. It's about
that one.
It's the guy who started Patagonia and the way that Patagonia is run. But yeah, that's it. Personal development is like my number one priority, I would say.
I would agree with Helen that she's really, really good about that, and she's really tuned in. And I would say for me, it's identifying the goal, and then in the company goal, and then asking our team, do we want to do that? Is that the goal we want? So like we kind of goal source, like what is it that we want as a group, as a unit? And then how badly do we want to get there? And so you kind of, in a quick meeting or something, you can identify really quickly whether people are in or out. And if they're out, you should step back and find out what you need to do to pivot to get your team back on board. Or, and it might not always be the team, but it might just be to get to create good goal setting, I think.
We also make it very clear to our team that if at any point they ever want to quit or want to leave, like it is encouraged. We don't encourage
people to quit.
No, but like if they want to quit, it's because they're not happy and they need to be doing something else. Like that it's no longer fulfilling them, which is why someone would quit a job. If they want to go start their own business, if they want to, become a mom and not work at all. Because, the 2 little jobs I did have, the hardest thing for me in that job was to quit and disappoint my boss or that sort of thing. And so it's almost like when you're raised in a family or raised by parents that really control everything you do and micromanage everything you do, it can become sort of toxic. And so that is not what we want at Blender Moms. Like we're very encouraging about the person as a whole, not just about what they're doing for the business. But like if at any point someone is not happy with their job, A, we need to know why so that we can fix it for the next person or fix it for you. Or B, we're going to, cheer you on as you go to your next venture to find out what actually is going to make you happy.
There's a question from Eugene. Should I read that question or should I respond?
Let's do the Q&As after, just because I don't want his question to overshadow the 2 last things that I have promised our community that we will learn today from you both. And I really can't think of 2 better people to take us on this journey. So my first question is probably more in your world and in your role at Blender Moms, Scott. I know that this industry is new to you, being that your previous trade was quite different. But if I were someone who was getting into food distribution and I'm looking to get these chain placements, what are 3 things, 3 pieces of advice that you would give to someone that they absolutely have to know before they get into that?
Wow, that's a really big question. So like you said, I was new to this business, and so I had to learn everything the hard way. And in some respects, that's a good way to learn it. In some ways, it makes it very, very difficult. But one of the big things, we launched with Whole Foods Market this past year in 2020, and that was awesome. And we were patting ourselves on the back. Little did we know how difficult and expensive that endeavor was going to be. And we're still in there. We're still committed to succeeding there. And it's kind of like, I would think of big grocery business, kind of like buying a home. You usually are going to have a mortgage on that home, and you're going to amortize that mortgage over several years. So you kind of think about the relationship as a supplier to distributors and to grocery as investing over time. Now, you certainly want to make money, but you need to understand that first 12 months or maybe even longer or potentially shorter, depending on your margins and your promotions, you're going to be investing a lot in the initial. So that first PO, it may look amazing. You might say, woohoo, we got a big PO, let's go. And then it turns around and you get paid on 60% of that PO. And you're like, oh, that hurts. That really stings. And then they ask you, well, hey, what are you going to do for us? Are you going to promote? What kind of trade spend are you going to do? So I would say those are the cost, and that's big, right? So of course, right? So your cost of goods sold, you have to know your margins really, really well. And you have to decide in that space, how much is it going to cost for me to spend to promote my product when I get into distribution into stores? And so some people that might be 5%, some might be 30%. I don't know. And you'll have to figure out, can my margins afford the trade spend? And then you need to be prepared to say there's going to be a certain amount of fees and penalties with these distributors where they're going to nickel and dime you down into a much more feeble margin position. So costs, pricing, trade spend, fees, chargebacks, you got to know that stuff. And there's some material on the internet about it. And if you ask any suppliers who are sort of in the space, including me, like, I'll be happy to talk to you about it. And I'm learning as I go. It's a challenge. So I think that's the one big thing.
But while you think about your next one, everything you just said is another language for people listening. That being said, do you remember when we talked with the new Primal, and the guy who started the new Primal, Jason, he sat us down and he was like, your margin needs to be this, your chargebacks need to be this, your trade spend needs to be this. And I think about that all the time. That was a very helpful conversation. So if anyone wants to ask Scott those types of questions, he can now answer them.
I can try, but there's no perfect answer. There's only what you're comfortable with and not comfortable with.
Yeah, I love you bring up Jason. Sorry to cut you off, Scott, because he's our speaker in March. So
yeah, and Jason, if you can join he's been really helpful for us. I think we had I sat down with him for coffee a couple times and just asked for some understanding, and he understood that where I was coming from because he'd sat in that same seat some time ago. I would say another thing is and I go back to this again, is goal setting. We had a direct to consumer business initially, and it was an e-com business. And I looked at Helen and I talked to her in depth about transitioning the direct to consumer to having sort of a hybrid model of, are we going to go into retail grocery? Because that is a very different business than what we had been doing. And so it just crushes your cash flow, but your top line might get better. So there's lots of things to think about, but I would say you need to have a real coming to God or coming to your spiritual being of what your business, what you want it to be. Like, where do you want it to be? Because all sales, Mark Cuban would say, sales cures all. He's right. But there are some sales that are better than other sales. And that depends on, like I said earlier, what you're willing to be comfortable with. Because if you want to control your margins and control your relationship with your customer, then a direct-to-consumer business is going to be ideal for you. But if you want to scale it and grow it in a much larger fashion, then that whole new world that I'm learning now in the deep end of distributors and grocery is where I am. And I accept the challenge, but I've been humbled multiple times by it. And but I haven't been afraid to ask for help. So I would say that. And then the last thing is ask for help, figure out with distributors, look at the fine paperwork and ask them to walk through the hypothetical situations with you. Distributors, for the most part, now there are some small distributors out there that do not apply to any of this conversation because they're very good mom and pop small distributors that will treat you fairly, just like they should, like you would want to be treated. But then there are the bigger ones, and they don't care about you really. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. They don't, until you're doing probably 7, 8, 9 figures with them, they probably don't even know your name.
So the reason,
and so ask for help is the third thing. Reach out to your supplier friends, because I've found a lot of friends in our space in CPG, and it's been an amazing community to be a part of. And it's stuff like this that creates the bridge. So
what's the pancake company that helped us?
Birch Benders was a helpful company for us.
But also, speaking of asking for help, tell them how we got into Whole Foods.
I don't know. I mean,
I remember.
Yeah, go ahead, Helen. I mean, this is your story. It's not my story.
Well, I just went on Instagram on my story and I said, hey, if anybody knows someone at corporate Whole Foods, can you send me their email? Because I keep emailing and they don't email me back. And we had about 10 people reply with emails for friends who worked at the headquarters in Austin, Texas. And within the hour, we had someone be like, hey, our friend sent us our Instagram. Can you fly down to Austin and pitch us your product? And a year later, we were in Whole Foods nationwide. It was crazy.
It took a lot of work. There was a lot of, yes, but the initial, the match that struck it was quite a bit of luck, but it was bound to happen. I mean, we were intent on getting in Whole Foods, and there was a lot of effort that got us to it. There was just one little thing that broke the camel's back, so to speak.
And
that
same
was
with Thrive Market, was just being relentlessly emailing them once a day for 3 weeks straight. We would email Thrive Market, and finally the one email that got their attention was, hey, we're talking to Whole Foods next week. Can you give us the time of day? And they responded.
Yeah.
And we went in. And same thing with Costco. Costco initially reached out to us, but with COVID, it kind of like cut ties with that relationship. But Scott and I just constantly emailed, and he would not respond. And we just kept emailing, and would change up the email every now and then, give him new data, new margins, things like that. And then they would finally answer. And now Scott got us into Costco.
But we're still aggressive with, I won't say aggressive, but we're still pushing with these channels, these customers, to be like, we don't want to just stop with what the few items we have in there. I want to introduce them to Helen's newer product and see how we can get a little bit further and a little bit further. Because what I've realized, with back to that question about the distributors and the groceries, you have to think of like, you just won this space, but someone else is just as hungry and they're right behind you and they want that space bad too. And so when you find your product and your name on that grocery channel, as big or small as the order was, you've got to fight to keep it. And you've got to do the homework and continue to work with the buyers and the customers and get people to purchase and create velocity, and think about what mechanics and instruments are going to allow you to stay there and grow there and get a little more space. Because you can walk down certain aisles and you'll see like the same product in some grocery stores, the same product, bing, bing, bing. And then they have a whole wall, and it's like, why do they have that many cereal boxes there? Or whatever it is, it's they sell. So, but it's just stay with it. Don't think like, oh, we're good now, we just made it, because you'll get discontinued, and that's a problem. So, and anyway, go ahead.
Just like courting someone you're dating. You gotta let them know you still care.
Show them some love. Well, I actually really love the Whole Foods story, and having just your friends on Instagram, help you make that connection, and asking for help as a lesson that came out of the chain expansion that you all experienced last year is so important. And, I know it's hard to ask for help. But having that community on your Instagram, Helen, is like awesome. And Blender Bombs overall, I would say, I think it's fair to say, that you all have leveraged social media as such a powerful tool in your business development and customer feedback. But also, you all have an influencer marketing program. You have your Bombassadors, and I've talked to more and more of my friends in the Startup Grind community that want to know more about this. So can you share, and Helen and or Scott, whichever one of you wants to speak to it, can you tell us maybe one thing you did really badly in creating the influencer program, and one or two things that you did that were really good and worked well for you all?
Yeah. So I think
great question.
We use a platform called Grin, and any big brand out there will use Grin. It's expensive, and we just started using it about a year ago. It's about $1,500 a month, but it's worth it because you can get that much in sales.
So is that the one one of the good things?
Yeah, I'm going to it.
Okay.
So on this Grin platform, you can create different campaigns. And our original campaign was where we would have 100 Bombassadors from all over the United States, and they would just be a Bombassador for as long as they continued posting. They had to post I think 2 or 3 times a week on their stories. And what we found out was, that fatigue, like their followers would get tired of seeing the same thing over and over and over again, just like a picture of their smoothie, blah, blah, blah. So the mistake we made was having like an unlimited, like a Bombassador program for people. So what we did is we changed it to 3 to 4 months, or as long as they were making an ROI, which through that Grim platform, you can see how many sales they bring in. And we minimum want like a 2x ROI, just kind of like breaking even sort of thing. And that way we can keep sending them product and giving them a discount code to share. But I feel like 3 months is key for any Bombassador. That way you can constantly be showing your product to new audiences. So switching up your Bombassador program more often. And it's a little bit more tedious, but it's worth it because you're just getting new eyes out there more often. That was a mistake that we made, but learned from. And another good thing that we did is actually we found a guy named Paul. We met a guy named Paul today, and Paul has an influencer marketing agency. And so he has a spreadsheet of all these thousands of influencers that he's been working with over 7 years, different brands and campaigns, and what the influencer's return on ad spend was, whether it's 1x, 2x, 3x. And so a lot of the bigger companies, the multi-million dollar in sales a year companies, they just want a 1x. So they want a 1x, I want to break even on what they spend with that influencer, for that influencer to bring in those sales through their code or their affiliate link, whatever, knowing that people are also buying their product on Amazon or in-store shelves. We're still a small company, so we need a 3x minimum so that we don't lose money, because we are not in a lot of retail. We're not that big yet. So finding a guy who has all those analytics can save so much time and money, because you're not taking a risk on paying for someone. If I see that this influencer had a 3x with Verb energy bars, I know that they're going to crush it with blender bombs too. So find a guy like Paul.
So
Paul's an alien.
So you can see the other products that influencers are involved with or representing then.
Only because this guy has been doing it for so many years.
But that's a big distinction. I used to look at influencers like
they were.
Anybody's an influencer, right? Like if you got a little following, maybe a couple hundred people or whatever, you're an influencer. So, but I think what she's saying is there are people who are professional influencers, and then there are people
100K.
like our Bombassadors are amazing, but they're not. Most of those they're not professional influencers. They're just people who loved blender bombs, who we had a good relationship enough to ask them to be like, will you post about us and we'll support your blender bomb habit or whatever that was, right? And so it was a kind of a give and take. So it's evolved over time. The Bombassador program has completely evolved, but
yeah, we never really did any paid influencers until we're just starting this year. We've done it every now and then. We did some, but anyone under 100K is a micro influencer. Anyone over 100K is a macro influencer, and those ones you most likely have to pay unless they organically do it, which so far we've done 80% of everything has been organic.
Yeah.
And even if you do pay an influencer, they have to have been using the product for at least 2 months, so they like the product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you kind of identified and defined micro influencers and macro influencers, because that was going to be my follow-up. I mean, I've read and dabbled a little bit just to understand it. I would consider one of my good friends, she lives in LA, this is an aside, I would consider her a macro influencer in the makeup industry, and she's a star. But yeah, thank you for defining that for those of us who may not be as familiar. I just have one quick final question, and it's still related to using social media as a tool for your biz dev. And then we'll open up and have the Startup Grind team join us to ask the Q&As that have come up over the course of the chat. My final question is, can y'all tell us a couple of examples, because I know that you use Instagram especially as a platform to get customer feedback on blender bombs. What are a couple of things that your customers have had a direct impact on that have guided your decision making?
They always pick up flavors we're going to launch. We'll run a poll on Instagram and be like, do you want peanut butter chocolate chip or peanut butter coffee for the new bomb bar flavor? And then we do what they're told. The one time we ever went against what they said was our packaging. So we were working with a designer, shortly right before Scott started. And when Scott got on, we were in the phase of choosing between 4 different designs. And I liked one design and Scott liked another design. And so we ran a poll and everyone in the poll liked my design, but we ended up going with Scott's design. And it was the best decision ever because he was like, Helen, like, I am adamant that you are wrong and I am right. And we're going to go with this design. And I'm so glad we did because it's so much cleaner. It's easily repeatable. So there's a few times where we, if someone just really has a strong gut feeling about something, then we go with that person. We go with Scott or whoever it is that has a strong gut feeling. Other things that we did, honestly, we have asked for help from Instagram people so many times. It is unbelievable. Like, we asked them if there's a wholesale account that we need to get in. And if so, tag the wholesale account. Then we reach out to the wholesale account and we're like, hey, Katie told us that blender bombs need to be in there. And Katie goes to your place twice a week. So that's one guaranteed customer.
I would say that our Instagram audience and early on and still is a big part in the evolution and development of this brand. It's not just like more followers, more sales. We look at them like this is our survey audience. This is our family. They tell us what works. They tell us what they don't like. They tell us what they like. They tell us when stuff's gone bad.
They tell us when they get shitty products.
Yeah, and of course we get some wild stuff in the queue as well. But a lot of it is really great and supportive and helpful. And we'll throw something like, what do you think? This color, or this name, or this name,
or pop-ups like, hey, spread the word. We're coming to this city.
And it's really cool to see that. We use them for more than an extension of sales. It's definitely part of us.
We also give back to them though. Like, we run sales a lot just for people who follow us on Instagram or just for people who watch our stories. We also will give away free stuff to people who watch our stories. Like, those who are engaged get rewarded because like we use them for free research all the time. So we want to get back to them.
Yeah. It's a really cool tool.
People who slide into our DMs to like communicate with us and just talk to us as friends, 1 out of every 30 or 40 DMs that we get, we'll give them like a gift card, like a $5 or $10 gift card as a thank you for just like talking to us. So we don't feel like a bunch of robots stuck behind the screen all day.
No, that's awesome. And I also feel like, and I'm just going to have the Startup Grind team get back on with us because I think they have some questions that they wanted to ask you guys. And as they do that, because I know technology is still a challenge at this point in this decade, my final, and this isn't so much a question as it is just a statement. I feel like your followers on Instagram, especially for Blender Bombs, you would assume that those are your most loyal customers because they've taken the time to go and find y'all on social media. And like, I don't follow brands if I don't love them or like believe in them. So I think that's really smart and it works very well for you all. I know it might not be the best fit for everyone's company or everyone's startup, but I think you all are so in tune with, that the community that you've built through Blender Bombs. And Helen, I know you have a pretty big following as well on your personal account. And Scott, you're getting up there too. I followed you guys since we have started this friendship that's going on. So I love watching y'all's.
Yeah.
And keep in touch that way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey team, welcome back. So we have Steve, Joseph, and Emily, who are our fellow Startup Grind Charleston volunteers alongside me. What question, and it doesn't matter what order y'all go in by any means, what questions came up during the chat? And thank you, Helen and Scott, for your time. It was a pleasure as always. So I just want to know what came up while we were chatting.
So I'm pretty sure Scott did a pretty good job of responding to a few of them in the question and answer section. But one that was from Jeremy was, how did you guys build up your personal and brand Instagram accounts?
So with my personal account, I think I got into Instagram right the last year where it was easy to grow a following because my following has not grown very much this last year. It's been slow the last 2 years. So unfortunately, I think that has a lot to do with it. But also, I know that if I had the credentials to give more nutrition advice, my following would be bigger. But once Blender Bombs, I used to give like nutrition advice, nothing crazy, but just traditional nutrition advice and, eat more plants, blah, blah, blah. But attorney Scott was like, hey, now that Blender Moms is getting bigger, you're a target. You've got to stop giving away any sort of advice because that could come back and bite Blender Moms.
No, not advice. It's claims. I don't
even want to do any of it though. It's too risky.
So like suggestions and recommendations and giving health advice are tricky when it's coming from like a business account. And so like I looked at that as risky just for liability purposes, because if you say, this is completely hypothetical, but if Helen was like, Blender Bombs cure cancer, then somebody might take that literally, and then we have a problem because that's clearly not true.
Right.
But we don't know, but we haven't had it tested. But at the same time, it's just, I wanted her to be careful. So we separated the two accounts, the Blender Bombs, and it was going to have its own story. The Blender Bombs, the brand, was going to have its own arc, and Helen as a person and as an influencer herself was going to have her own story as well.
But I know for anyone who does have any sort of certification, whether it's a master's or a major in a certain thing, or you are a nutritionist or et cetera, if you give away good advice and screenshot testimonials and share your testimonials and get video testimonials and share video testimonials, that's the easiest way to grow an account.
Yeah, and to Jeremy's question, I agree with Helen. It's going to take some work. You've got to get your face on there. You've got to get your customers' testimonials on there. You've got to create content, and it takes work, because as startup people, you want to build products and sell them, and there's a lot of work there. And then you think, I have a friend, he's starting an e-bike rental and sales company called Rebellion Roads, and he's the first of his kind in Charleston, and he's doing great. But the social media side of his is he hates doing it because he's like, I'm just not good at it, and I'm nervous, and it's awkward when I'm on there. And I'm like, trust me, you're better than you think you are. So I would say, shed the awkward, just be a little bit more brave. People want to hear your story. They want to know more. They want to see the pictures and the videos. So just get busy with it.
TikTok. I mean, TikTok now, the algorithm allows you to grow the way Instagram used to. And I think maybe, hopefully, because TikTok is such an easy platform to grow on, maybe Instagram will change its platform soon to make it easy to grow again because of the competition.
I'm going to jump in, and I know we're down to like the last like milliseconds, but it's so, like, you guys are so easy to talk to, and you have so much, insight, and you just share it so genuinely and authentically. I see that Chris put something in the Q&A that it looks like Scott or Helen, one of you, answered. And he asked, what's one community that you're eager to make aware of your business in 2021? And I know that you answered it. So you all are looking to speak more to men and people who are 50 and up. Can you talk, because I saw this on your stories the other day and it just like made my heart like grow 2 sizes, I think. What inspired that for you all? Why is it important that you get Blender Bombs in front of this older population?
And it was my personal development. I was reading a book called Aging to Saging, and it talks about how you change as you age and what your priorities become, et cetera, et cetera. But it also had a whole section on there about ageism, which is very prevalent in the United States, and it's not very prevalent in other parts of the world, apparently, according to this book. I'm not going to make any claims, but it basically says 2 out of every 100 people in commercials are over the age of 55. And even when they are over the age of 55, they've still got this sex appeal. They've still got, they're very healthy and fit. Like, it's not a good representation of people who are 55.
We all know sex sells, but we're wondering if at some point in time, people get tired of that and they want something more realistic. And we realize we have a good customer audience that is older, and we're not speaking to them like we should be. And Helen's was reading this book, and she was like, this is crazy. This is a crazy statistic. And we started talking about it, and it made a lot of sense. And I wrote in their male audiences because I know we're not speaking to men. I think we just haven't. The Blender Bombs, we're a company led by women, and so it's great, but we have a tendency as business people and marketers to speak to ourselves, speak to our friends and our own audiences and our own followings, and it's easy to not see the forest for the trees sometimes with that. And so I think we're challenging ourselves to to expand our content and our reach and our focus.
And with the older crowd, you know, they're the ones that also need it the most. And sometimes they're not at the forefront of my thoughts because I work with people who are in their 20s and 30s. I am surrounded by women all the time, and that we don't have, you know, money to pay models. So we just use ourselves as the models for ads, and the models on Instagram. And whereas really, like, I want people 55 and older to be using these products because it is so healthy. Like a smoothie is so healthy, and it will just give people, you know, a better experience with their day. Like they'll feel better, they'll have more energy, that sort of thing. Anything that fruits and veggies naturally do to you, as long as they get in the habit of doing it. And so it was that book that kind of sparked it. Also, they have, and I'm not the one who thought about this, but I got flooded with DMs of people being like, I'm in that age group and I have dispensable income. Like, I would love to buy more blender bombs. And one of them was like, yeah, start noticing when you go out to dinner, a lot of the younger people are placed in the front of restaurants and older people in the back of restaurants. And that is just so messed up. I'm excited about aging, and I want our brand to be someone that gets people excited about aging healthfully too.
I think that's an important lesson. And I haven't really thought about it until now that maybe startup companies challenge themselves to think, and some, you know, big brands are doing this. Who's my audience? Who's my key customer? They have millions of dollars worth of software, and they are using it to target you. And little companies should challenge themselves without the software, but maybe just with like friends of theirs and with their product, and think who else could use this product, you know, because we always think I made this to solve my problem, but there's probably someone else out there that could use it too. And you've got to speak to them. And so the way we do it is through Instagram. People may have it a lot of different ways, but yeah, I thank you for asking that, Alex. I don't know what the answer is, but I just, it's an important thing to keep in the back of your mind when you're creating content and photography and videoing and putting stuff out there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hear you guys, and I'm just so glad that I saw that come up on y'all stories the other day, because it, like I said, I thought about it as well, and I run marketing for the startup that I work for. So, you know, it's something that we try to be conscious of, but we're a startup, so we're not paying models, and we don't have like some sexy, like tangible product to put in front of them. So it's not really needed, but you know, it's not easy. And when you're trying to do good, and that's what I feel like y'all are doing, and what I believe, you know, my company does, and we do that in different ways. You have to appeal to people, but you're going to make mistakes, which I think is something that we learned from y'all today. Along the way, you're going to make mistakes, but if you're making a conscious effort to change things and take that time to self reflect, and just be transparent about that, which I feel like y'all do such a great job of, and why I'm such, you know, a big fan. Only good things will come out of that. So just thank y'all so much for your time today. I know we went over just a little bit, so I'm going to cut off the recording, but just, you know, snaps, claps, whatever it takes for Helen and Scott from Blender Bombs today. So thanks for joining us.